to let that drive me. So when I got into high school, those same kids I would see on a daily basis that used to make fun of me. I remember telling myself, you're gonna run 10 yards past them on the lacrosse field, or you're gonna do 10 more push-ups in wrestling. You are not gonna stop. And it created this kind of insatiable drive, and it was a fitness from within. So that's where it really came from. Is I really believe fitness is a conduit for a more empowered life. It's not about the sweat, it's about the sweat with soul. You know, it's if you have true love for it, it will absolutely help you lead a more empowered life. So fitness from within has just been my motto since I was this kid.
I love that. And I've also watched a lot of your videos too. You do a lot of acro yoga and martial arts. Would you say that also contributes to your physical appearance?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. So acro is something much newer, and I got into it with a girl I was dating, and we both loved yoga, and we just started seeing more people do it. And it was actually, so I'm big into personal development stuff.
Yeah.
And two things that were humongous on that. One is salsa, which I have class tomorrow night.
Okay.
You guys are absolutely invited to it somewhere. It's so fun because you have to hold hands and eye contact, and as a dude, you have to lead. As a girl, you have to be allowed to be led.
Yes.
All these lessons in there. But in acro yoga, so the girl I was dating at the time, we started shooting a show, and we wanted to feature acro yoga. So we get in there, and it's all about communication. Verbal and nonverbal communication, because as the base, which some women are, men, you're responsible for their safety. I mean, ultimately the flyer is responsible for their safety as well, but you as the base are responsible for, you're dictating the dance, you're leading it. So you're responsible for someone's safety, and there's so much communication that goes in. And it's interesting to work with other people or watch other couples do it. And there can be great communication, not great communication, arguments, all these subtle things that are really important in relationship and trust building. So that was I've really dug into that. Not part of it is the physical training. It's definitely tough being a base, but it's been the internal growth.
Yeah.
For me, I am fascinated with things that make you sweat with soul. So to me, acro yoga is one of them. The other, definitely capoeira that you were talking about, right? I think that was the other thing. That is a very physically demanding martial art. Very physically demanding. So there are times when I was in it for the aesthetics and the this and the that. It's so much deeper for me now. I got my graduado belt, my blue belt, which is basically a black belt.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I got that at the end of 2018, and you have to learn 5 different instruments.
Oh wow!
There's a lot of music that goes into being a capoeirista at a certain level. You have to speak Portuguese. You have to be able to sing in Portuguese. There's the culture. There's so much more that goes into it just besides the physical training. But yes, for me now, it is also about my commitment to this art, and loyalty to something is important to me. Consistency just breeds success on many levels, whatever it is.
Right.
That is something I am committed to being consistent with, because I show that loyalty and consistency will then show up into other areas of my life.
Yes.
So the physical part is now a byproduct. Like, I like it, I love it, it's great. And if a girl's like, oh, that's really nice. But that's not anymore the forefront of it. But yeah, if you do capoeira, your bunda, your booty, and your body is gonna get in good shape.
Women, rest assured, he definitely looks really good in person, just in case if you guys can't see it over here. Your fans have been able to follow your journey as far as transforming people's lives on NBC's Biggest Loser. How was that full experience for you? What would you say was the biggest reward out of all of that?
So one pivotal moment was I had a teenager on my team, a guy named Austin. He was, I believe, 18 when he first came onto the show. Another girl that was 19 that turned 20. And they both had such a different experience. So my experience with sports, and I realize this for a lot of people, that you have to be able to draw on your roots to take that next step a lot of times. And if your roots have success in them of some form, it's much easier to continue to do it because you've seen yourself and you've experienced yourself in a winning situation. Both of them had never had that in sports. They were overweight from the very beginning, which I wasn't. I had gained weight. So they didn't have this similar thing. They were picked last from the beginning. So it was very interesting being able to coach them, because they're like, well, I can't draw on that because I never actually believed that anyone would believe in me, because I didn't believe in it. I didn't think my coaches did, because I wouldn't be put on I was always on the bench. So I had to say, well, then you have to look at the moment here. We had a gold medalist actually in wrestling, Rulon Gardner, on the team, and they had been placing very close to him in certain events. And I said, this is an Olympic gold medalist that now you're finishing a half mile or this thing, and you have to use those moments to draw on if you can't go back to your past. And it was very interesting working with them, and those experiences on coaching people like that was different. You know, I was coming from New York as a celebrity trainer. I was training clients like the Victoria's Secret supermodels, right? That was a tough job. But like going from
Good job.
someone had to do it, man, it was rough.
Right.
But I really was working with a different type of clientele at that point. And although everyone, no matter at what status you are, all has the same insecurities. Like even those supermodels were always like, I don't feel good about this, or everybody. But my really coaching honed in on this fitness from within. Really, a lot of it as like someone to coach was on The Biggest Loser. And I will have to say, I really appreciated being able to work next to Jillian and Bob, who are just incredible at pulling these really authentic emotional breakthroughs out of people in matter of minutes, you know. And it was I'd been developing something on my own. So Sweat with Soul is a clothing line, but it's really a positive vibes, active lifestyle. And I'm launching a Sweat with Soul class. And part of the technology in that I want to teach other instructors is something a friend of mine, Stacy Lee, calls emotional fitness, and I call the fitting point, where in a workout or different points of people's fitness journeys, they will cross over the tipping point in their fitness, and they'll hit their fitting point where all of a sudden they're on like autopilot, they're shining. You know, there's something their accountability is through the roof. There's something that they've been struck. So I got to see this technology working alongside of Bob and Jillian. Part of it is people's guard is up so much, and taking people to a physical, just physical exhaustion and fatigue safely is really important, because when they get to that point, and anyone who's gone through an ass-kicking workout, right? Whether you're sprinting or whatever you're doing, and you really get to that moment and you surpass it, and I call this the chatter. The chatter starts going, what are you doing? No one's looking, just stop. Why did, it's the self-doubt.
Yeah.
And you tell the chatter to talk to the hand, and you face that moment, you're hitting a fitting point right there. And I just got to see very skilled people do this intentionally. And then, but once you bring someone to a fitting point, you can't just bail, because emotions come up, tears come up, fears come up. You have to actually be there and coach them through that breakthrough, or bad things can happen.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, like what was one of the most memorable things, was learning how to get people to a fitting point in a very effective way, and then coaching them to see, how their strengths from within at that point.
Yeah.
Because some of them they're just churning up such like hatred and self-doubt and things, abuse and all sorts of crazy stuff comes up. You just have to be there and coach them through it. And that truly is how people have transformation. The physical weight is one thing, the emotional weight is really the success.
Well, we hear that you were overweight as a child.
Yes.
And you probably had some really bad eating habits. Can you
Yes.
walk us through some of the things that you were eating, and how are they
Yes.
different now?
Yeah, so when I look back at this as an adult, and I've gone through a lot of personal development stuff, I said, wow, I went through, my mom had me read every book on adoption. She had me go to meetings with other kids that were in foster care and whatever. And you can be prepared in so many ways, but then particularly with a girl, not a guy, but a girl, who then I wouldn't be able to physically kind of stand against. Guys, it was like, oh, you're gonna bully me, you know, like one of these things. And the girl basically said, I'll never forget this, she goes, oh, those aren't your real parents.
Oh, wow.
And I said, yeah, they are my real parents. Of course, my mom and my dad are like, we are your real parents, we raised you. They raised me. No, your real parents are the ones that gave birth to you, and they're not. And so I get into this conversation with her that, you know, I'm used to dealing with an adult, my parents who are like, and this and that, and she would not stop. And I just was so defeated in that moment and was like crying. And then we had the most strict second grade teacher. She came over and she gave a really hard talking to that girl. And the girl ended up crying, but I was like, wow, Miss Taylor defended me. Like, she never, ever, but she said, those are his parents. And like, but that, even though I felt very comfortable in that moment, it made me be like, I will never want to go through this again, feeling this ostracized and helpless in this conversation. So fast forward to a few years later, I had a wheat allergy, very severe wheat allergy. I couldn't eat. So wheat, and I was diagnosed as sort of hyperactive, probably ADHD at that time, wasn't allowed sugar. That was in everything. So I was the one kid bringing his own food that my mom would go to, you know, there was no Whole Foods. She was just going to town after town, finding these organic foods for me to eat, which I didn't want to and wouldn't. And so what would happen to me is if I went in the lunch line and I picked something like chocolate milk with sugar and pizza with wheat, they wouldn't let me have it. And all these kids were always making fun of me. And I'm the kid with the bag lunch. So I would basically throw my bag lunch away. And these are these very deceptive habits that I was developing. I didn't even know. Throw it away, get in line, and I'm like, Sina, you know what? I know you want white milk and the chicken, but you're gonna get the chocolate and the pizza, and I'm gonna get that, and we're gonna switch. And I would do that, and we would switch. Another very deceptive habit. And then I started binging on all these foods to get attention. And of course, I would, you know, half an hour later, I'd be in the bathroom, bent over with severe stomach pains and just all these effects. But I started breaking all these school records of like food, but what I ended up doing was creating a binge habit. Not binge and purge yet, but binging. And I gained a lot of weight. Then when I eventually got into high school and got into wrestling and I wanted to make varsity, I was my sophomore year. I weighed in at football season at 170 as a guard, and I wrestled the next year at 120. And I dropped, now part of the way that we dropped weight was a lot of bad habits, and one of them for me was binging and purging, which wasn't that uncommon with wrestlers. You know, guys after the season could gain 20 to 30 pounds in a matter of weeks because you're that underweight in weeks. You know, anyone in the bikini, you know, competition or whatever, they're like, know it well. I would weigh in 5 times a day. So it's interesting when I coach a lot of particularly women and they're like, I want to break up with the scale. I'm like, let me tell you what it was like 5 times a day, trying to get in 1/8 of a pound. It was a mental prison you don't want to be in. So the bad eating habits, so much of it was food restriction and a lot of binging, a lot of purging, a lot of that. It was really rough. So not only was I coming on to Biggest Loser with being overweight, but also the eating disorders and all the other mental abuse that goes along with it. And I think that was one of the reasons I got cast, is because I was able to talk about it in my interviews and talk about it from a really authentic place.
What advice do you give to parents that are actually struggling to get their child to eat healthy and stay active?
You know, the number one thing is you got to lead by example. If you do not set the bar yourself, it's very difficult to convince your child to do that. It has to be repetitive. It has to be a lifestyle. And if that's not something that you're able to do right now, you have to as a parent, you have to surround yourself with friends and other people and an environment that creates that for yourself. You may have to actually, and this was an issue with parents on the show. they had a lot of overweight kids. Or if the overweight kids on the show, their parents are overweight. And it was clear the parents, like one of them, we had a father and a daughter on the show, and he was all about her in the beginning. I said, Moses, it's about you, man. If you do not lead by example here first, you can't provide for your family. I mean, I get it that you want to help them, but you have to do this. And you're in an environment where people are truly doing this to help you and everyone around you. And that guy broke every Biggest Loser record. Like, he lost the most amount of weight in the first week. He broke 100 pounds the first, fastest time. He just went bananas. But his why became his family. So it's very interesting seeing that. But for parents, it's like, again, if you want to provide for your kids, you have to lead by example and surround yourself with people or cut people out that aren't doing that. And that was another lesson going back on Biggest Loser, is some people would go back to an environment that was not supportive, to spouses that had not made that fitness journey, that resented almost that they had gotten the success. And those ones were the ones that gained the weight back first.
Yeah.
They didn't have a supportive environment.
Yeah.
Do you think that parents should limit what their children do eat, or do you think it's important to let them eat junk food while they're young and kind of see what happens later on in life?
That's a really good question. I think, so I grew up where we weren't allowed junk food in the house, but if we were out or traveling, we were allowed to have it, or if we went over to someone else's house. But my mom had struggled with her weight most of her adult life, so she just didn't have it in the house. Once in a while it'd be like Fruit Loops or something, but normal stuff, it just wasn't there. So I would say to parents, yeah, like that would be a rule, is we're not going to purchase this in the house, but